I remember the way the fork felt in my hand. Cold. Solid. The weight of it somehow grounding me as the rest of my world began to tilt. Laura stood in the kitchen doorway, backlit by the warm glow of the overhead light, her arms folded across her chest, lips painted red and trembling, whether from nerves or guilt, I couldn't tell yet. But after 21 years of marriage, I knew my wife well enough to recognize when something was about to explode. She hesitated just long enough to make it worse. "Mike," she started, voice soft but deliberate, "I've been thinking, maybe we should open our marriage." She said it like she was suggesting we try a new restaurant. Like it wasn't a bomb she had just dropped into our living room. The silence that followed stretched out forever. I didn't react. Not outwardly. I cut into my steak, medium rare, seasoned just the way I liked it, and chewed slowly, letting the warmth of the meat and the cold steel in my hand stop me from reacting the way I wanted to. Scream. Cry. Flip the damn table. Instead, I looked up and met her eyes. Calm. Collected. Careful. "What makes you say that?" I asked, as if we were discussing politics or the weather. As if she hadn't just torched 2 decades of vows with a smile on her lips and a tremble in her voice. Laura took a step closer, her heels clicking on the tile, fingers tightening around the edge of the countertop. "I just think it could be good for us," she said. "We're in a rut. We've both changed. It's not like we'd stop loving each other." She said it like she believed it. And maybe she did. But what Laura didn't know, what she couldn't possibly know, was that I had already seen everything. Every secret. Every Friday night she said she was out with the girls. Every motel room. Every man. Every lie. So I smiled. Just a little. And said, "Sure, Laura. Let's talk about it." Because the trap was already set. And she was standing right in the middle of it. Thank you for watching this far. If this story hit you somewhere deep, drop a 1 in the comments. I want to hear your thoughts. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this channel with someone who needs to hear that loyalty isn't weakness, it's power when given to the right person. Before everything fell apart, my life was ordinary. Not in a boring way, just in the kind of way that feels safe, predictable. The kind of ordinary that you work hard to build. I was a shift supervisor at a steel plant on the edge of Pittsburgh. 26 years on the job. The kind of work that leaves your hands calloused and your back sore, but puts food on the table and dignity in your chest. I clocked in every day at 6 a.m., clocked out by 4:30 if I was lucky, and drove the same road home I'd driven since I was 24. Waiting at home was Laura. We met back in high school. She was the bright, funny girl who smelled like strawberry shampoo and talked faster than anyone else I knew. I was the quiet one. A little rough around the edges, maybe, but steady. The kind of guy her friends told her to avoid, but who always showed up when it mattered. And I did show up. Every single day. We married young, had our first kid by 27, and our second 3 years later. James and Lily, they became our whole world. Laura stayed home while I worked double shifts. I didn't mind. I liked being the provider. The steady one. It felt like a purpose. Like I was building something real. Our life wasn't glamorous, but it was good. Friday night pizza. Sunday mornings at the farmer's market. Christmases spent wrapping last-minute gifts at midnight while sipping spiked eggnog in flannel pajamas. She'd hum when she cooked. I'd sneak behind her and wrap my arms around her waist just to hear her laugh. We were partners. Or so I believed. But somewhere along the line, the laughter got quieter. The hugs became routine. And the warmth between us cooled to a low, familiar silence. I didn't see it coming, not then. Not in those early cracks that I told myself were just the stress of life. But looking back now, I realize, the foundation had already begun to rot. And I just kept patching it with duct tape and blind faith. It didn't happen all at once. That's the part that eats at me now, how easy it was to miss, because the changes came slowly, like a shift in seasons. At first, it was the girls' nights. She'd never really been the type. Laura liked staying in, binging crime shows, folding laundry while humming off-key, sipping wine from the same chipped mug every Friday night. But suddenly, she had plans. Every week. Hair curled, makeup darker, dresses I hadn't seen before. Expensive ones. I asked, lightly, "Since when do you go out on Fridays?" She smiled, too quick, too rehearsed. "It's just Marie and the girls. I need this, Mike. Don't worry." And I didn't. At least, I told myself I didn't. I wanted to be the husband who trusted his wife, who didn't question her every move. So I smiled back. Told her to have fun. Watched her walk out the door as something cold settled in my chest. Still, I didn't press. I gave her the benefit of the doubt, over and over. But then came the distance. It started with small absences. Dinner left on the stove instead of shared. Conversations that trailed off into silence. Laura was always somewhere else, glancing at her phone, lost in thought, brushing off my touch like it was static. I'd come home and find her already upstairs. Sometimes the light was off. Sometimes I heard her laughing softly, not at anything I said. The kids noticed it too. "Is Mom okay?" Lily once whispered while setting the table. I told her yes. I kept telling all of us yes. Because admitting anything else felt like stepping into a storm I wasn't ready to face. So I buried the ache. I worked longer hours. I convinced myself we were just going through a phase. But deep down, I felt it. Not just the distance. The dishonesty. Like I was sleeping beside a stranger who knew exactly how to keep me in the dark. By the time our anniversary came around, I knew. I didn't have proof, not yet. But the gut doesn't lie, not when you've spent over 2 decades memorizing every look, every shift in tone, every unspoken word. I told myself I needed clarity. Closure. Truth. But the truth was, I needed control. So I got to work. 2 towns over, tucked behind a gun shop and a pawn store, there's a man who doesn't ask questions. He's ex-military. Knows tech better than most IT guys. We spoke for less than 10 minutes. I handed him cash and a sketch of what I wanted, a necklace, delicate, custom designed, with a hidden pinhole camera at the center of the pendant. Motion activated. Wi-Fi enabled. Clean. He didn't flinch. Said it'd be done in a week. I picked it up 2 days before our anniversary and wrapped it in the same silver paper I'd used for years. The card was blank inside. I couldn't write anything without giving myself away. That night, I grilled steak, lit candles, poured wine. Played my role. And when I handed her the box, I smiled like a man in love. She gasped when she opened it. "Mike, this is, wow." Her fingers trembled slightly as she lifted the necklace from the box. "It's beautiful." I watched her fasten it around her neck, catching her reflection in the kitchen window as she adjusted it gently. "I'll never take it off," she whispered. She meant it. And that's what gutted me most. That she could look at me with those same eyes, with that same soft smile I fell in love with at 17, and lie with such grace, such ease. She kissed my cheek. Clinked her glass against mine. Called me the best husband a woman could ask for. And I nodded, because the camera was already rolling. The first time I watched the footage, it nearly broke me. I waited until she was asleep, deep enough that her breathing slowed and her body curled into that familiar shape on the far side of the bed. I slipped the necklace off her neck with the gentleness of a man still pretending not to know, then took it to the garage, where the air smelled like cold concrete and old tools, and plugged the microSD card into my laptop. The video blinked to life in silence. Laura at a bar I didn't recognize. Laughing too hard. Her hand on a man's chest, then his knee. A man half my age, tanned, cocky, his arms slung around her like she was some new prize he'd just pulled off the shelf. I watched her lean in. I watched her kiss him. I watched her disappear into the back exit of the bar, his hand trailing behind her like a leash. The next clip was a motel room. Different man. Different dress. Same Laura. There was no hesitation, no doubt in her body language. She was comfortable. Practiced. I saw her take off her ring, place it on the nightstand, and climb into bed like it was just another Friday. Like I didn't exist. My stomach flipped. I barely made it to the sink in time before everything came up: dinner, bile, grief. I collapsed to the garage floor, hand gripping the side of the tool bench like it could keep me tethered to reality. I wanted to scream, to destroy something, to run. But instead, I did what I always do. I got back up. I wiped my face, cleaned the sink, and sat back down in front of the screen. I opened a new folder. Named it Fridays. I sorted the footage. Date. Time. Location. Man. The next week, I did it again. And again. And by the fourth video, the nausea was gone. By the sixth, I stopped feeling anything at all. By the 10th, I was focused. Precise. She had chosen chaos. I was going to give her consequences. It was a Friday, of course it was, and I already knew how the night would go. She'd left the house 2 hours earlier in a black dress I didn't recognize, her perfume trailing behind her like an alibi. I didn't say anything. I just kissed her on the cheek and watched her walk out, knowing she wouldn't be with Marie or any of the women she claimed to meet. I grilled myself a steak, poured a whiskey, and sat in the silence that had become louder than any argument could be. But that night, she came home earlier than usual. I heard the keys fumble at the door, the unsteady rhythm of her heels on the hardwood. She was humming, offbeat, a little too loud. Drunk but cheerful. The kind of drunk that makes you feel invincible. Or maybe just detached from guilt. I stayed seated, casually swirling the last of my drink, eyes fixed on the TV screen that wasn't playing anything at all. She walked in, leaned against the doorframe of the living room, cheeks flushed, eyes glassy. "Hey," she slurred lightly, "you're still up." "Couldn't sleep," I said without looking at her. There was a pause, then a sigh. She moved closer, plopping down next to me on the couch with a forced kind of softness, like she was rehearsing how to appear delicate. "Mike," she said slowly, drawing out the words like they were heavier than they actually were, "I've been thinking about us. About what we could be." I raised an eyebrow but said nothing. "I mean, maybe we need to try something different. Something freeing. Like an open marriage." I turned to look at her, and she gave me a small, nervous smile, vulnerability laced with false courage. It was an act. A setup. She wasn't asking for permission. She was rewriting the story, trying to make what she was already doing sound like it was for us. "Open marriage, huh?" I said, voice even. No emotion. No judgment. She nodded, hopeful. And I just smiled the same way I did when I handed her that necklace. Because I already knew who she was. Now I just needed her to say it out loud. She kept talking after that, about modern relationships, personal freedom, and how love doesn't have to be exclusive to be real. She was quoting podcasts now. Books she'd never read. Words that weren't hers, crafted to sound profound but falling flat in the air between us. I nodded occasionally, let her fill the silence. Let her believe, for just a little longer, that I was the fool she needed me to be. But inside, something was unraveling. Not just anger, though God knows it was there, bubbling hot just beneath the surface, but something colder. More surgical. It wasn't just the betrayal. It was how easily she tried to justify it. How effortlessly she reshaped the story, painting herself as some enlightened explorer while I was the outdated relic weighing her down. She didn't want honesty. She wanted permission to keep lying, without consequence. In that moment, I wasn't her husband anymore. I was an obstacle. A formality. Furniture she'd grown tired of but didn't want to pay to replace. I sat there for a long time after she went upstairs, her footsteps soft and unburdened on the hardwood. I stared at the blank TV screen, the reflection of my own face staring back, older, tired, but sharper than it had been in years. And that was the night I stopped reacting and started responding. Not with shouting. Not with pleading. With strategy. I didn't just want the truth anymore, I had that. Now, I wanted impact. I wanted her to feel what it meant to be erased so cleanly, so precisely, she wouldn't even know where the knife had entered. And so, I began building the response that would leave her speechless. Not just revenge. Justice. From that night on, my routine changed. Every Friday, after Laura left the house, usually with a kiss on the cheek and a lie in her voice, I'd wait. Not to wonder, not to hope. Just to confirm. Once the front door clicked shut and her car disappeared down the street, I'd walk into the garage, retrieve the necklace from her jewelry dish, where she absent-mindedly left it every time, and transfer the footage onto my laptop. It became ritual. Methodical. Clean. I'd label each file with the date, timestamp, location if I could figure it out. I cross-referenced footage with bank statements, rideshare receipts, anything I could silently track. I made folders, bar nights, Motel A, Motel B. I even tracked recurring faces, men who came and went like passing storms. After the first few weeks, I stopped feeling anything when I watched. No nausea. No anger. Just data. I wasn't watching my wife anymore. I was studying a stranger. A woman who smiled too wide at bad jokes, who tucked her wedding ring into her purse like it was a receipt she planned to return. A woman who had already written me out of her life, she just hadn't informed me yet. I kept everything backed up, 2 external drives, one hidden in my office drawer, the other stored in a lockbox at the bank under my name only. And every Friday, once the files were saved and cataloged, I'd return the necklace to her dish, right next to her untouched wedding band. She never noticed. She was too busy living a life that didn't include me. And I was too far gone to care, at least not in the way I used to. What I cared about now was finishing what I'd started. Some nights, I'd watch the footage with a cup of coffee in hand, like it was part of a grim morning routine. One eye on the screen, the other on the rising sun. Nothing surprised me anymore, not even the audacity of it. There was one clip, burned into memory, that played out like a scene from a bad movie. Laura, at a rooftop bar, her hair curled and lips painted a shade of red she hadn't worn in years. She leaned across the table, laughing too loud at something some slick-haired kid said. He couldn't have been older than 27. Clean-shaven. Cocky. The type who probably called his mother bro. She slid her hand across the table and touched his. The same hand that used to cradle our newborn daughter. That used to squeeze mine during long drives home from family dinners. He stood. She followed. And before they disappeared down a narrow stairwell, he reached back and slapped her rear like it was his to own. She giggled. That was the sound that broke something. Not the slap. Not even the kiss before it. The giggle. Carefree. Comfortable. Like this wasn't her first time being touched like that by someone who wasn't me. That was when I stopped seeing my wife in those videos. I didn't feel betrayal anymore. I felt distance. I felt relief. Like watching a stranger make terrible decisions on a screen I had the power to pause. I sat back in my chair, let the video continue to roll, and realized something I hadn't wanted to admit: the woman I married didn't exist anymore. Maybe she'd been gone longer than I cared to notice. And what was left? A body in a house that no longer felt like home. A name on legal documents. A face I once memorized now fading like an old photograph. The love? That had died quietly. Not with a fight, but with a shrug. With 100 little lies stacked one atop the other until the weight crushed whatever foundation we once had. All that remained now was responsibility. A job to finish. A plan to execute. And a slow, precise unraveling that she would never see coming, until it was far too late. It was late, almost 2 a.m., when I queued up the next video. Same routine. Same cold detachment. I didn't expect anything new, just more of the same twisted rerun. But this time, I froze. At first, I thought I was wrong. The footage was grainy, the lighting low. But there was no mistaking that walk. That voice. That laugh. Jeff. My cousin. The man in the video with his hand at the small of my wife's back, pulling her into him like she belonged to him, was Jeff. My best man. My blood. The man who toasted us at our wedding with tears in his eyes, who held my newborn daughter in the hospital waiting room, calling her his little niece. The man I trusted like a brother. Because in every way that counted, he was one. And now he was in a cheap motel room with my wife, his hands tracing over skin that once belonged to a promise they both helped me make. She kissed him like it was routine. Like this had happened before. And in that moment, something sharp and final tore through the numbness I'd carefully built over the last few months. Because this wasn't random anymore. This was coordinated. And that made it so much worse. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat in the garage with the laptop screen glowing in front of me and memories flooding my mind like a dam had burst. Me and Jeff at 10, skipping rocks by the river. At 14, him covering for me when I missed curfew. Us at 17, scraping enough gas money together to drive 2 hours to see a football game we'd lied to our parents about. He'd always been there. The first person I called when my dad passed. The one who stood beside me in a tuxedo, hand on my shoulder, right before I turned to see Laura walk down the aisle. He was the one who whispered, "You picked a good one, Mikey." The irony could choke a man. I thought of our backyard barbecues, Jeff holding a beer, flipping burgers on my grill, cracking jokes with Laura while our kids played tag in the yard. How long had it been going on? How many times had he shaken my hand knowing full well what he was doing behind my back? The depth of it made my stomach turn. Not from shock, no, those days were long gone, but from the sheer weight of calculated betrayal. This wasn't a fling. This wasn't my wife getting bored and stupid with a stranger at a bar. This was someone I trusted with everything. Someone who had sat at my table, eaten my food, laughed with my kids, and then slipped into my marriage like it was his to borrow. It occurred to me that their affair might have been the reason she brought up the open marriage idea. A cover. A way to smooth the edges around the truth. And he probably helped her build that lie. Of course he did. Because he knew I'd never go along with it, not willingly. They needed to bend the narrative before I snapped it in half. But they underestimated me. They thought my silence meant weakness. They didn't realize silence is sometimes the final breath you take before setting fire to everything. That night, I pulled out a notepad and wrote Jeff's name down beneath the others. Time. Date. Location. And then I circled it. Twice. Because I wasn't just documenting anymore. I was preparing a reckoning. I was backing up files one evening when I stumbled on a folder I hadn't seen before. It wasn't part of the usual surveillance. It wasn't from the necklace or any sync device. This was buried in Laura's old laptop, one we rarely used anymore, the kind she thought I'd forgotten existed. Curious, I clicked through it. Inside was a draft. An unsent email. Its subject line was simple, in case you ever need to understand. The message began with my children's names, James and Lily, typed out as if she were speaking directly to them. My stomach tightened before I read a single word. I know you probably won't understand what's happened between your father and me. But I hope someday you can. He wasn't always like this. He used to be warm. Loving. But over the years, he changed. He stopped trying. Stopped listening. The house felt colder. I felt invisible. I didn't go looking for anyone else. I just needed to feel human again. I didn't mean for this to happen. She drafted the narrative already. She was painting herself as the wounded woman, the neglected wife who just needed warmth. The language was gentle, manipulative, perfectly rehearsed. She never once mentioned the multiple men. The lies. The calculated betrayal. She certainly didn't mention Jeff. "Your father is a good man," she'd written, "but we stopped being good together. Please don't hate me for what I had to do." What she had to do. I sat there, the words sinking into me like acid. She wasn't just cheating. She was preparing to rewrite the story entirely, just in case things didn't go her way. Just in case I found the courage to leave her first. She didn't just want to escape the marriage. She wanted to escape the blame. I stared at the screen for a long time, fingers frozen above the keyboard, rage sitting cold beneath my skin like an old injury flaring back to life. But I didn't react, not like before. No confrontation. No dramatic monologue. I didn't barge into the bedroom to demand answers or wave the email in her face like a weapon. I copied it. I printed it. Then I saved it to a flash drive and filed it next to the external hard drives I'd been quietly building my case on. Evidence. I wasn't going to just win this war. I was going to dismantle her campaign before she even got the chance to launch it. And I knew that if she was preparing that message, if she was drafting emotional letters to our kids behind my back, then her endgame was already in motion. She wasn't loyal. She wasn't remorseful. She was calculating. Which meant I needed to be smarter. I spent the next few days going about life like nothing had changed. I made breakfast. Took out the trash. Even rubbed her shoulders one evening while she scrolled through her phone with half a smile. She didn't know that every second I spent near her, I was playing a role. She didn't know that her character arc was already written, and I was holding the pen now. Let her write her email. Let her believe she'd soften the blow for the kids. Because when the truth came out, and it would, she wouldn't be able to hide behind sentimental fiction. There'd be video. Names. Dates. Her words. Her choices. Undeniable. And she would learn that the man she thought was too passive, too predictable, too quiet to fight back, had been planning her undoing in perfect silence. The night I chose wasn't special. No anniversary. No dramatic moment. Just a regular Thursday, the kind of evening that would fade into memory if not for what was coming. I grilled steak out back, just like I had hundreds of times before. The sizzle of the meat was comforting, familiar in a world that had slowly twisted into something unrecognizable. Laura sat inside, scrolling her phone at the kitchen counter, sipping wine like she hadn't shattered anything. She smiled when I walked in with the plates. A warm, easy smile. Like a woman who thinks she's already won. I played my part to perfection. We ate by candlelight, her idea. She was in one of those good moods, affectionate in that old, curated way she used when she wanted something. She talked about possibly taking a weekend trip, just the two of us, to reconnect. She even mentioned a bed and breakfast in the mountains. I nodded, chewed my food, listened with the same quiet steadiness she mistook for softness. She thought I was opening up. She thought she'd sold me on the fantasy. She didn't realize I had already lit the fuse, and the clock was winding down. After dinner, I poured her another glass, refilled mine, and led her to the living room. "Got something I want to show you," I said casually. She followed, unaware. Unbothered. And the whole time, I kept thinking how poetic it was. That she would be destroyed by her own performance. By the necklace she still wore. By the footage she'd unknowingly gifted me week after week. The room was quiet when I grabbed the remote. Too quiet. Then I pressed play. And everything she thought she controlled began to burn. The screen came to life with no warning, no introduction. Just Laura, walking into a bar in that red dress she said she bought on sale. I kept the volume off. Didn't need sound. The images were more than enough. At first, she didn't recognize what she was watching. She tilted her head slightly, confused, wine glass halfway to her lips. But then the camera angle shifted. It was close, steady. Hidden in plain sight. The necklace. Her necklace. And just like that, her smile collapsed. Her hand lowered. The color drained from her face in slow motion as recognition settled into her features like frost on a window. She blinked at the TV, as if hoping the next clip would prove her wrong. But it didn't. It was her again, same smile, different man. Laughing, touching, leaning in too close. Then another clip, motel room. Dim light. Her removing the ring, setting it gently on a nightstand. A man's hand tracing down her spine. Her mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. I didn't look at her. Not yet. I let the montage run, each clip no longer than 10 seconds, stitched together with brutal efficiency. A greatest hits of betrayal. And finally, the last image, her and Jeff. His hand on her lower back. Her lips on his. I paused the screen there, freezing them mid-embrace, like a painting they'd never be able to scrub clean. That's when I turned to her. Her eyes were wide, glassy, unfocused, like someone staring down the barrel of a loaded truth. She opened her mouth again, finally managing a sound, just one word. How? I leaned back on the couch, calm, steady. The version of me she thought had disappeared years ago. Since our anniversary, I said. Since the day you promised you'd never take that necklace off. She reached for it instinctively, fingers brushing the pendant. Too late. It had already seen everything. And now, so had I. She didn't speak for a long time. Her hand lingered at the necklace, eyes still locked on the frozen image of her and Jeff on the screen. Her mouth was trembling now, but no sound came out, only shallow breaths and the rising panic behind her eyes. I stood up slowly and walked to the kitchen table. From a drawer beneath the placemats, I pulled out a thin manila folder and laid it gently on the coffee table in front of her. She looked down at it like it might bite. Divorce papers, I said, my voice even. You'll find the terms are minimal. Her head snapped toward me, and for the first time, I saw something beyond fear. Desperation. I can explain, Mike, I didn't mean. No, I cut her off sharply. Don't insult both of us. She blinked, tears starting to form. The kind that had worked on me in the past. But not tonight. Sign those papers quietly, I continued, or I send everything, to your friends, your parents, your church group. The video montage. The emails. The timeline. I made backups. Multiple. Her face crumbled like wet paper. You wouldn't, she whispered. I leaned in slightly. You don't know me anymore, I said. But I know you. She stared down at the folder, trembling. And in that moment, I saw it, the exact second she realized she'd already lost. Not just the marriage. But the control. She didn't sign right away. She sat there for a few minutes, shoulders hunched, staring down at the stack of pages like she was waiting to wake up from a bad dream. A tear slipped down her cheek. Then another. She reached for me, reflex, maybe, but I didn't move. Didn't flinch. Just stood there, watching her without anger, without pity. Mike, please, she whispered. Can we just talk about this? I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. The only thing that had ever mattered between us, truth, was already dead. Finally, she picked up the pen. Her hand shook as she signed each page, one after another. I didn't rush her. I didn't gloat. I just stood by the window, arms crossed, listening to the scratch of ink on paper and the soft, broken sounds she was trying to swallow. When she finished, she sat there a moment longer, then placed the pen down gently, like it mattered. She didn't pack much. A small suitcase. Her laptop. Some toiletries. She didn't ask for help. She didn't try to hug me goodbye. She just walked to the door, pausing only to glance back once, eyes swollen and rimmed with regret. I'm sorry, she whispered again. I nodded once, but said nothing. And then she was gone. No slamming door. No dramatic goodbye. Just silence. A silence that, for the first time in months, didn't hurt. 2 days later, I called the kids. I told them there was something important we needed to talk about, and they came home that weekend, James from college upstate, Lily from her first apartment just across town. We sat in the living room, our old family space where birthday banners once hung, where Christmas wrapping paper used to cover the floor like snowfall. They sat on the same couch they'd fallen asleep on during movie nights. And I told them. "Your mom and I are getting divorced," I said, voice steady. The room went quiet. Lily blinked. James stared at the floor. "What happened?" Lily finally asked. Did someone do something?" I shook my head gently. "No. It's just, things change. People grow in different directions. Sometimes, it's nobody's fault." It was a lie, but a necessary one. They didn't need to see their mother through the lens I had been forced to look through. They deserved to remember the woman who made pancakes in funny shapes, who kissed their scraped knees, who whispered "I love you" before every school play. "Did you try counseling?" James asked. I smiled, tired. "We tried everything we could." They were quiet for a while. Processing. Hurting. And then I added what I needed them to hear most. "I'm still your dad. That hasn't changed. I love you. And I always will." Lily nodded through tears. James reached over and squeezed my arm. And that was enough. They didn't need to know everything. Just that, in the middle of something broken, they were still whole. I didn't stay in the house. Too many ghosts in the walls. Too many echoes of laughter that had turned into silence. I sold it a month after the divorce was finalized and bought a small cabin near a quiet lake 2 hours out of town. No neighbors for a half-mile in any direction. Just pine trees, water, and the kind of stillness I hadn't known in years. I'd always said I was too busy for hobbies. Now, I had nothing but time. I started waking up with the sunrise, not to an alarm, but to birdsong drifting through the window. I made coffee without rushing. Sat on the porch in a hoodie and watched the morning mist rise off the water like a curtain lifting on a slower, simpler life. The first few weeks felt strange. Like I'd stepped out of someone else's story and hadn't quite found my own yet. But the quiet didn't feel empty. It felt earned. I took up woodworking again. Refurbished old furniture I found in junk shops. Fixed squeaky drawers, sanded rough edges, turned broken things into something worth keeping. There was something healing in it, taking what was worn down and giving it purpose again. I learned how to cook properly. Not just grilling meat and heating frozen meals, but real cooking. Searing, roasting, seasoning. I watched videos, burned things, laughed at myself, and tried again. And slowly, without realizing it, I started rebuilding. Not just the furniture. Not just the house. But me. It was a flyer on the bulletin board at the local co-op, beginner's cooking class, Thursdays at 6 p.m. All welcome. I almost ignored it, but something about the phrase "all welcome" stuck with me. That's where I met Rachel. She was the instructor. Mid-30s, patient, quick-witted, with a laugh that made the whole room feel lighter. She didn't flirt. She didn't ask prying questions. She just noticed things. Like how I chopped too slow at first. How I always stayed late to clean up. How proud I looked when I finally nailed a bechamel sauce. We didn't talk about our pasts. No what happened to your marriage. No sad stories swapped over simmering pans. Just recipes, books, quiet jokes, and the kind of ease that feels like slipping into warm water after a long, cold walk. After a few weeks, we started having coffee after class. Then wine. Then dinner, just the two of us. And somewhere between cinnamon rolls and poorly sliced onions, we found something resembling peace. Not the kind that comes from forgetting, but the kind that comes from finally being seen. She never asked what broke me. And I never asked what broke her. Because sometimes, it's enough just to share the rebuilding. We'd been seeing each other for 3 months before she told me. It was late September. The air had just started to turn, crisp and smoky, and we decided to take dinner out onto the porch. I'd made grilled salmon with lemon butter, her favorite, and she'd brought over a bottle of red wine with a label I couldn't pronounce but pretended to recognize. We were laughing about something, probably my complete inability to open the wine bottle without mangling the cork, when she went quiet. Not uncomfortable. Not withdrawn. Just quiet. She stared out at the lake for a long while, then placed her glass gently on the table. "I used to think I'd never do this again," she said, almost to herself. I didn't ask what she meant. I just waited. "My husband left me," she continued. 3 years ago. Walked out one Thursday morning. Took his gym bag and a box of clothes and said he was going to stay with a friend for a while to clear his head. She gave a short, dry laugh. Turns out, the friend was my best friend. They'd been seeing each other for almost a year. I looked at her then, really looked. She wasn't crying. She wasn't bitter. But her eyes held something I recognized too well. Scar tissue. "I didn't tell anyone for months," she said. "Not my family. Not my coworkers. I was too ashamed. I kept asking myself what I'd missed. What I did wrong. If I'd been too distracted. Too cold. Not enough." I reached across the table, rested my hand gently over hers. "You weren't," I said softly. She smiled, but it trembled. "Neither were you." We didn't say anything for a while after that. There was nothing that needed saying. Because in that moment, I realized something I hadn't felt in a long time, not attraction, not even comfort. It was recognition. The kind that lives beneath the surface. Two people who had been gutted by the people they trusted most. Two people who had learned how to rebuild, plank by plank, without anyone applauding the effort. That night, we didn't talk about the past again. We just sat in the quiet, her hand still in mine, the lake reflecting the stars above us. A love born not of fairy tales, but of survival. And that, somehow, made it feel more real. It had been almost a year since I last saw her. By then, I'd stopped checking social media, stopped asking mutual friends for updates. She'd vanished from my daily life like a storm that had finally moved on, leaving wreckage behind, sure, but no longer roaring in my ears. And then one afternoon, she appeared. I was standing in the produce aisle at the local grocery store, trying to decide between 2 bags of oranges, when I looked up, and there she was. Laura. She was by the apples, her back turned at first, wearing a loose gray sweater and jeans that hung a little too loosely on her frame. Her hair was shorter now, darker, and there were tired lines under her eyes I didn't remember. She looked older, not by years, but by wear. Like something had frayed inside her and never quite been sewn back together. She turned, and for a moment, she didn't see me. But then she did. Our eyes met across the fruit section, just a blink of time, but long enough. She froze. I didn't move. And then she did something I didn't expect. She mouthed the words "I'm sorry." Not loud. No theatrics. Just a silent whisper across a space filled with the hum of fluorescent lights and the faint sound of a radio playing 80s hits. And I nodded. Not out of forgiveness. Not out of warmth. Just acknowledgement. We were no longer husband and wife. No longer enemies. Just 2 people who had once shared everything, and now, shared nothing but a quiet, mutual understanding. She turned first, pushing her cart slowly down the next aisle, disappearing behind a wall of cereal boxes. I stood there for a moment longer, holding a bag of oranges, and realized something surprising. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel satisfaction either. Just peace. The kind that doesn't come from winning, but from walking away, and knowing you never have to go back. After everything, I didn't throw the necklace away. I removed the hidden camera, wiped the memory, crushed the lens beneath a hammer in the garage, just once, clean and final. But the chain? I kept that. It sits in a small wooden box on the top shelf of my closet, tucked beside old photos, a few cards from the kids, and a dog-eared fishing license I never renewed. Not as a trophy. Not even as a scar. But as a reminder. Of what I survived. Of who I became. For a while, I thought revenge would be fire and fury. I thought it would be exposing her, humiliating her, letting the whole world see what she'd done and making her carry the weight of it publicly. But I never pressed send on the video folder. Never shared the files with her church group, her parents, or even Jeff's wife. Because somewhere along the way, I realized something much more powerful than revenge. She had to live in her truth. And I got to walk away from it. Every lie, every betrayal, every twisted attempt to rewrite our story, they couldn't touch me anymore. Because while she was still explaining herself in half-whispers and apologies mouth across grocery aisles, I was waking up to birdsong and cooking breakfast for someone who actually saw me. That was the real victory. Not destruction. But rebuilding something so solid, so unshakable, that her actions no longer had a place in it. And sometimes, the most devastating revenge is not letting them matter anymore. Before you click away, I want to ask you something. If your partner came to you out of nowhere and suggested an open marriage, would you agree to it? Would you walk away? Or would you start watching more closely? Let me know in the comments. I'm genuinely curious what you'd do. Not what sounds right, but what your gut would say in that moment. Because sometimes, it's the quiet reactions that reveal the most. And sometimes, silence is the first step to strength. Being betrayed doesn't make you broken. Staying broken does. Mike's story isn't just about a marriage that ended. It's about what came after. About a man who refused to be defined by someone else's selfishness. Who stopped asking why me, and started asking what now. He didn't scream. He didn't destroy. He rebuilt. With stillness. With grace. With strategy. Because dignity isn't loud. It's quiet. Steady. It's the decision to rise without dragging anyone down behind you. To protect what matters. To heal without performing the pain. And most of all, it's the understanding that closure doesn't come from revenge. It comes from no longer needing one. In the end, the best revenge isn't proving someone wrong. It's living in a way that makes them irrelevant to your happiness. It's waking up beside someone new who sees you fully, not as a placeholder, not as a provider, but as a partner. It's sitting on a porch with a cup of coffee, hearing your own thoughts, and realizing they're finally quiet. So if you're going through it, if you're in the thick of betrayal, heartbreak, or starting over, remember this. Your story doesn't end where it broke. Sometimes, that's exactly where it begins.